On Cole Maddox's porch, a tin cup sat upside down, a black-bound ledger pressed tight against a chest, and a grooved bone token swayed just slightly. Two women sought shelter. The sheriff brought a new order, and fire and sand spilled into the yard. When a page bearing his name caught in the brim of his hat, the silence grew heavier than lead. Open the gate, or open the book. Wind threaded through the porch like a thin cord along the roof's edge, lifting the red dust into a faint smear. Cole Maddox sat straight-backed in a wooden chair worn into the shape of a man, the tin cup upside down on the step, leaving a dark, dry ring. The old dog at his feet only twitched an ear when the gate shivered twice on its own, then stilled. Wind scraped along the wire fence, making a thin sound like metal on glass. On the porch boards, a beetle crawled straight toward the cup's shadow, stopped, turned in place, as if it had met a cold stone. On the trail, dust lifted in a narrow strip. Two horses slowed at the fence's shadow. The lead horse's forefoot struck once, dry. The riders said nothing. Their shadows reached the threshold and stopped exactly where the dry ring had just been. Cole didn't look directly at the road. His eyes stayed on the chair arm, where a crack in the wood ran like a dry creek bed. The first dismounted. The hem of a dust-heavy coat brushed her thigh with a soft rustle. She placed a name on the step like setting down a stone. Mira. Then, with a nod toward the second, Lark. The K came rough. Lark clutched a black-bound ledger tight to her chest, the spine's corners worn pale, the middle pages swelling as if holding something thicker than paper. She stood angled, her hand gripping the cover until her fingertips whitened. Cole reached out, turned the cup upright. The base hit wood with a clear talk. He poured it half full, slid it to the step's edge with two fingers. The water rippled once and stilled. No words. He rose, walked slow to the yard. The toe of his boot skimmed the sand's edge, leaving a thin cut, then stopped at the barn door. He slipped the latch. The hinge groaned one long note, like an old rope pulled 1 inch tighter. The door opened into shade, cold with the smell of old straw. Mira didn't thank him. She only let her shoulders drop slightly, her eyes tracing the yard's runs. From the stone well to the trough, from the broken ladder to the iron chest set against the wall. Lark still held the ledger as if it were hot. As she stepped over the threshold, the book's edge brushed the wood, leaving a thin black line. The horse behind snorted, jerking its head right as if hearing something inside. The old dog rose halfway, then sat again. Inside, the black-sooted stone stove stood shut like a stitched mouth. Mira touched its lid. Dust clung to her palm in a gray smear. She dragged a bundle of dry wood from the ledger on the rough table's edge, covered it with cloth as if afraid the wind might open it. Each time Mira passed, Lark's glance flicked to the ledger, checking the tie, the edges. Cole stood in the doorway, his shadow cutting the floor like a dark beam. He looked at the stove, at the book, at the small window frame strung with cobwebs, then turned back to the porch. Outside, the cup had less in it. The remaining half-ring of water clung to the rim, reflecting a metallic sky. Cole lifted it, set it into Mira's hand as she stepped out. She met his eyes for a second, not probing, not deep, only confirming. She drank once, tilted it back for Lark. Lark didn't drink. She set it back on the step, nudging it into place exactly where the old ring was. The movement made a faint tap like a nail on glass. The stove flared again with the sharp sound of long, dry wood, each flame touching a layer of old wind, greased with resin. Mira spread a thin blanket on the wooden floor beside the straw. The fabric rasped softly. The four corners were frayed, threads splayed like corn silk. She checked the barn latch, shook it. It rattled loose. She stepped out, nodded once. Cole handed her a small cloth bag. Inside, rusted nails with a few screws. She tipped it, counted with her eyes. On the table before the stove, she laid each nail in a row, all heads turned the same way, like lining up men for orders. Each nail struck wood with an old, solid tuck. Lark leaned on the table's edge, head bent, eyes on the book. At the third nail, she looked away from it for half a beat, over Cole's shoulder to the porch. On the porch post hung a small bone piece, cross-grooved, tied with hemp. It swayed faintly, though the wind had stopped. So faint that without focus, you'd think your eyes shook. Cole stepped up, touched the cord. It was worn to a split. His thumb pressed the knot. The bone fell into his palm, like a tiny bird skeleton. It was warm, not from fire, but from long sun. A repeated notch marked its face, the knife line stopping short, as if cut in haste. He turned it once, caught a thin whiff of tar, then slipped it into his inner pocket without a word. Between pages. Quick, but Mira saw. Mira said nothing, only set the hammer down, its head touching the table edge with a small thud, like a period. Cole turned just then. He didn't ask. His eyes stopped on the back of Lark's hand, where a rope mark still lay. She pulled back, let go of the book, stepped half a pace, heel knocking a rusted nail off the edge. It rolled once, stopped, pointing at the door. The old dog raised its clouded eyes, tracking it like a beetle. It didn't bark, just breathed heavier. Mira fed another stick to the fire. The glow caught the ledger's cover. In the red light, old gouges in the leather showed, the pulls of other hands, more than once. Lark pulled the cloth edge up to cover it from the fire's glare. Her fingers shook. Her nail pinned the fabric to keep it from slipping. A loose thread hooked her shirt button, stayed there, a knot by accident. Mira stepped onto the porch, stood by the post now bare of bone, her neck nearly level with the old knot. She touched where the cord had been. The wood still held a polished mark from something that had swung there daily. Not lighter than the rest, just smoother, like from repeated hand-wiping. Mira looked at Cole's pocket. He looked back. No words made it out. Cole took the tin cup, turned it once. A thin crescent dent marked its base. He set it exactly on the old ring, dent facing the barn, like a small arrow without a recipient. Lark noticed. She glanced, turned away, but pushed the book half an inch from the table edge, as if bracing against a sudden shove from the door. A sudden gust rattled the barn door. The new crossbeam held. Mira turned, nodded, tied another loop of old rope for surety. The rope rasped through wood like teeth, grinding in a restless sleep. Lark sat on the blanket, not letting go of the book. Her knees rose under cloth, the corner of the ledger pressing bone still visible. She touched her nose's bridge, stroked down, as if smoothing an extra heartbeat. Cole went to the doorway, slid a thin board under the chair leg to level it, The chair stilled. He sat again, hand on the cup but didn't lift it. The brim of his hat shaded half his eyes. Outside, the horses' shadows had turned, heads into the yard, manes stirring, making small sounds. One hoof tapped stone, the ring carrying like a can being opened. No one asked where from, no one said how long. The stove smoke clung to Lark's hair, seeped into Mira's shirt, and onto the chair arm under Cole's fingers. On the porch, starting with why? Cole didn't answer. No one had asked. He only breathed through his nose, long, even. The iron chest stayed locked. No key lay on the table. The Winchester stayed unseen, marked only by a fresh oil smear on the lock, a lone bright spot on the porch. In the barn, the fire sank to red coals. Lark leaned against the wall, eyes open, staring into the book like into a pit whose depth she already knew. Mira shoved the water tub back. The water inside rose to wet the rim, left a thin mark, then fell. She tied the blanket's edge with a simple knot, pulled, it held. A crow landed on the fence post, tilted its head toward the porch. It gave one short call, then fell silent, as if testing the place's tone. On the porch post, where the hemp cord had hung, the crow's tail brushed, catching a new spider thread. It swayed but didn't break. Lark touched her own pocket's inner edge, where something hard bumped her fingertip. She drew her hand back fast, pressed it to her knee. Mira had seen. Cole had too. They didn't ask. Not asking was its own way of setting a question. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of damp earth from somewhere not nearby. On the tin cup at the step, a single drop gathered at the rim, fell to the wood, soaked in instantly, leaving nothing new. Cole lowered his hand from the cup. He tilted his head, catching a thread-thin sound from the fence line, only the wire rasping against a post as the wind eased. His eyes turned to the barn's shadow. Inside, a tiny streak of light slid across the ledger's cover, then vanished. No one said, "You can stay." But the barn door was shut from inside, the latch tight, the blanket spread, the stove red, the nails set deep, the cup placed exactly on its water ring. On Cole's person, the shirt pocket now carried an extra grooved bone piece. In the porch boards, the old oil stains stayed still. Only the silence had changed meaning, from hollow to heavy, like a tied cloth bag not yet showing what was inside. Mira hefted a hammer, braced two crossed planks against the barn door. The rusted nail heads shone for a second, before vanishing into dry wood. The tuck-tuck, so even it sounded like a kind of count. Cole stood on the porch, poured water into the tin cup and set it on the step. By morning, there were 2 dry lip marks on the rim. By noon, 3, without a word added. Lark passed the cup, paused on the 3rd mark as if weighing a number, then bent to pick up a fallen nail and returned it to Mira's perfectly straight row on the table. In the barn, the sack's mouth. The old dog shifted, facing the yard, ears aimed at the gate. A draft passed through, bringing the faint scent of hot iron, though no forge was near. In the barn's corner, a short-handled shovel leaned against the wall at a fixed angle, its shadow aligned with the new crossbeam Mira had just set. Lark checked the latch. It growled. Mira tugged. The wood hissed cold. Everything fit. Only a thin gap at the floor's edge, just wide enough for a straw to push halfway through before catching. A small misalignment careful eyes would note. Cole looked at it longer than a breath. then stepped back to the porch and leveled the chair with a thin shim. The tin cup was still there, its dent aimed at the barn like a compass needle that refused to turn. The clatter of wheels in a dry rut announced itself before the dust arrived. A black-topped wagon slowed, its tongue jerking once. Sheriff Brant stood, straightened a stiff collar, a paper sealed with red wax in hand. His two companions wore wrinkled clerical coats, their right hands marked by dark whipcord welts like ink stains, nails cut too short, flesh rounded at the edges. Brant stepped one boot length onto the porch, not quite inside, not staying out. His eyes swept the yard, stopping at the tin cup, 3 even dry marks, like a man recognizing a prearranged sign. He flipped the paper to show the county's wheat seal, reading nothing aloud. It made the dry rustle of something issued too many times. The old dog blocked half the step, not growling, tail stiff. In the barn's shadow, Mira showed half her figure. Lark stayed behind, ledger hugged under cloth. Cole didn't lift his brim, only straightened more. Brant's gaze slid past him like along a shelf. The iron chest, the new latch, the fresh oil at the lock, the chair now squared. "Paper," Brant said, one word just loud enough, holding the sheet's edge in the air between them. He didn't offer it across. He left it there, testing who would touch first. Cole didn't reach. A gust lifted the page's corner. Brant pinned it with a clean, polished nail. The two clerics held their horses steady, shoulders close as a plank, eyes gauging the distance from porch to barn. One glanced at the cup, the other at a fresh boot print in the sand. The yard was empty, but it felt as if something had just passed through, leaving only a thin hiss in the air. The safety on the Winchester clicked down, metal's tongue in place of words. Cole held the stock across his belly, wrist turned to an angle long practiced, long left unused. Mira pushed the barn door a fraction. The muzzle came level with the chest of the man on the left. Her eyes didn't widen, only narrowed enough to look clean along the sight. Turned to the wagon. He didn't look over his shoulder, but as his boot hit the step, his glance cut once more to the cup, habit of a man filing away a detail to use later. The wheels rolled, ruts popping dry, the dust behind them lifting and refusing to settle. It hung as if listening, waiting for a word to follow it. None came. Only Myra's hammer stopping mid-swing and set down without a sound, like pulling a word back before it's spoken. Lark laid the ledger on the table, palm pressing the cover, a reflex of someone afraid a page might fly open. Cole didn't lower the rifle at once. He kept it across his thigh, stock touching worn cloth, leaving a faint shine. In that stillness, the shovel in the barn's corner slipped half an inch from the wagon's tremor, its mouth striking floor with a thin tang. Myra looked at it, then at Lark. Lark bent lower, as if shielding flame from wind, though the stove's fire was steady. Night covered the yard not in black, but in torch sound, resin crackling, boots scuffing gravel, metal brushing metal in short beats. Firelight struck the new nail heads, each sparking briefly before dying. The old dog stood in the porch shadow, back slightly arched, eyes clouded with a small orange ring. Lark sat tight to the table, hand still on the ledger. Her other hand went into her inner pocket, finding something grooved. Her middle finger hooked it out, a smaller bone piece than Cole's from the post, thin, light, with 2 cross grooves and an off-center drilled hole. It didn't sway. It rested in her palm like something long used to being hidden. She tilted it to the torchlight. The knife marks were rough, the last cut jerking in the way of a left-handed carver. Myra saw. Their eyes touched like two sheathed blades already set against each other in thought. Cole stood in the porch doorway, gaze fixed on the fence where low flames flickered. He didn't turn, but a thin tendon rose in his neck, the kind that showed before a man spoke. Lark clenched the bone, pulled a short hemp cord from her pocket, tested the hole. Perfect fit. She raised it to chest height, gauging the distance from porch to gate as if measuring a sight line more than ground. Then she didn't hang it. She folded the cord, pocketed both bone and cord. The bone brushed the ledger's edge with a tiny tick Myra heard. She shifted half a step, heel pressing into Brant's earlier footprint toward the fence. The lights had retreated one pace, then stopped, as if they too were listening. Lark pressed her pocket, keeping the bone still. Her thumb traced the grooves, eyes on the gate as if waiting for a signal from the object itself. Cole pulled the lever a second time. The pump only breathed empty. He let the handle drop. Metal hit wood with a clean, flat sound, like a "no" knocked out of an object. In the barn, the coals sank, red withdrawing, shadows thickening. Myra bent to gather hammer and nails into a wooden box, shut the lid without locking, set it beside the iron chest. Two chests parallel, two locks unmatched, one open, one shut. Outside the fence, someone struck a new torch. The sh was needle-thin, like steel in water. Wind laid the flame sideways for a moment, showing the loose hemp ends at the gate's edge. Lark swallowed. The sound loud because everything else was held back. She shifted the bone in her pocket to a grip that would need only half a beat to draw. Myra saw, set her hand on Lark's shoulder, light, but enough to keep the thing in. Cole lifted the tin cup, turned it upright, hoping for a last drop, dry. He set it upside down, dent toward the fence, a sign needing no words. Across the way, a light flashed 3 times and died. Signal or wind play, none said. The tank held its choice like a sealed mouth. On the porch post where the day's bone had hung, only a shadow mark. Nearby, a fresh spider thread swayed lightly, unbroken. The stillness stretched between them like a taut cord. Each held one end. Cole on the tank, Myra on Lark's arm, Lark on the bone. Outside, the steady rasp of metal, patient, like a blade being sharpened before storage, not use. Inside, a coal collapsed, revealing an unburnt crescent of wood, pale, shaped like the cup's dent. No one mentioned the red-sealed paper. No one asked why the tank stopped the moment torches showed beyond the fence. The secret wasn't named yet, but it already had a smell. The tar's bite on the pipe thread, the scorched bone scent in Lark's pocket mixed with soot, the dry paper mussed under the gray cloth waiting for a careless pull. And the wind, this time, carried nothing away. It kept everything in the yard, like a silent clerk recording line after line without omission. Lark slipped the tie free. The rope slid over the ledger's edge with a shft, like dry hide drawn fast. The book opened in the swollen middle. The smell of old ink and damp leather rose. On the page, slanted script, a red seal blurred at one corner. C. Maddox stood in the left column, aligned with salt, fat, shot. In the margin, Brant's signature, rigid edge. It rolled half a turn and stopped, the carved face marked with cross grooves. Lark bent close. At the page's margin, Near the date column was a small mark identical to it. 2 cross grooves, a knife jerk at the end, exactly the cut of a left-handed hand. The mark was annotated with a dot of ink, like an eye. In the narrow margin, the initials S.A. Safe. Mira lifted the bone, turned it under the stove's red glow. A thin tar smell rose from one corner. Pitch worked deep into the bone.
She touched the jerk cut with a fingernail. It was rough, in the way of haste. She set the bone back beside the name C. Maddox. All 3 looked at a straight line. Bone piece, page mark, Brant's seal, 3 things aligned. No one had to say debt. Outside, wind shoved a curtain of dust into the porch. The tin cup trembled, its dent throwing a brief glint. The old dog stretched its head, ears pricked toward the gate, then folded. It had heard horse hooves far off.
Lark drew in a long breath, her hand resting on the ledger's side, as if to keep it from turning on its own. Mira counted something in her head, not past 3, then locked it.
Shelter had changed meaning, not just a latched place, but a marked point from before. Cole didn't explain. He reached to close the ledger part way, not hiding the name, only the mark. Mira looked at him for a beat. A question passed through, but never built into words. Lark swallowed, a tendon rising in her neck. She set her other hand on her inner pocket, feeling a thin, hard thing with an off-center hole. She pulled it free, a smaller bone piece. It also had 2 cross grooves, but the hole was more skewed, the hemp cord newer. The tar smell was stronger now, not faint. Lark looked down, speaking so softly it was almost to her own throat.
I marked the way.
The sentence didn't finish. Mira reached. Her hand was quick and clean, closing on the bone before Lark could grip it back. A hemp strand slid across her nail, cutting a fine white line. Mira walked straight to the stove without turning her head. She threw the bone into the waiting coals. It cracked on contact, tar smell standing in the throat, clinging to the tongue. Lark lurched half a step toward the stove by reflex, then stopped, folding her arms around the ledger as if it were a life float.
She bit her lip. A bead of blood welled. Cole dragged a dented tin drum from the barn corner to the table. Its rim carried a streak of old soot. He put the ledger inside, shut the lid, drove a long nail through the hinge off, coming back with the smell of sulfur. Torches beyond the fence flared up on reflex. Torchbearers looked up. Mira raised her gun, standing dead center in the barn doorway, eyes half closed to narrow the sight into a thread. Lark braced, hugging the drum, edging toward the stove. A short, unvoiced bugle call pulled from the gate, a signal to advance. Fire-specked figures poured over the fence, like water over stone steps. Metal clattered against saddles. Torches spread into a ring, drawing jagged orange lines across the yard. Brant stood at the rear, felt hat low, left hand signaling, right hand on the inside pocket where papers lay. He didn't speak aloud. His lips moved as if reciting a list. Cole rolled his shoulders forward, the Winchester seated into his collar. He fired into the sand in front of the lead man. Grit splashed his face. He blinked and fell half a step back. Mira shot left, the bullet licking over a torch head, flaring it before it snapped. 2 on the right drew pistols, barrels black in the red light. Lark watched a shot rip through the porch, splinters flaring from a post. One struck her cheek, hot, sharp. She made no sound. "Hand over the book!" someone yelled. The shout cut short, like from a spent breath. Lark looked at the tin drum in her arms, at Cole. He was cocking his head to listen, shoulders tensing to the rhythm of a bullet skimming the roof. The barn roof caught fire at a straw rope corner. The first smell of burning straw was almost pleasant. Then it turned the gut. Lark closed her eyes for a single beat, opened them, pulled the nail pin from the lid loop. The hot metal smell from the drum's mouth was a warning. Cole glanced, not in time to speak. Lark drew the ledger out. The black cover drank the firelight, slick like wet hide. She turned and flung it into the yard. The book flew through torchlight like a black fish breaking water. Every barrel swung to follow that arc, a perfect curve pulling men's eyes and the flames in their poles. Time tightened to the sound of cloth brushing air. Mira read it first. She shot a wheel. The wooden axle cracked, the wagon's right side dropped, the box tilted, throwing Brant forward. He flung one arm, dropped his torch. It rolled, fire licking dry dust into a burst where no one wanted it. Cole lunged, clubbed the wrist of the man reaching for the book. Bone popped dry. The ledger hit the dirt, its cover striking sand, pages splaying like dry scales. A bullet grazed Cole's shoulder, hot. His shirt tore. A wet line spread. B. Stamped in the corner. It drifted like a dying moth, turning and landed in Cole's hat brim. The brim sagged with sweat and age. The page caught in the leather band, hung, tried to slide, then lodged in a loose stitch from the last wet season. Cole tilted his head into the wind, adjusting his hat to slide the paper deeper. No one saw. All eyes were on the fire. Brant cleared to the wagon's sound side, one hand at his ribs, the other drawing, firing twice. One slug hit the porch post, knocking the tin cup from the step. It rolled 3 turns, stopped at Cole's boot, dent, facing up like a small eye. Lark hurled the drum across the yard. It struck a shin, folding a man down, the hollow ring echoing. Mira pulled Lark in, their backs scuffing the wall, leaving a soot streak. Smoke thickened. Ash clung to sweat in powder. Cole stepped half back, cradling the rifle at his hip, reloading, levering slow and sure. He didn't fire fast. He picked the man reaching for the book on the ground. When the hand touched the cover, Cole's Winchester stock came down on his ankle, a small, clean break. The man cried without forming words, curling. The ledger stayed in the dirt, loose pages scattered like dead leaves. A flame's tip crawled to the cover. Lark dropped to smother it barehanded. Burnt skin smelled of bitter fat. She yanked the book up, spine now caked with soil. Mira shoved her up, tossed the ledger into a dark corner near the water tank, where the draft was weak. Lark clutched her hand, the skin lined with thin charcoal streaks. "Pull back!" someone yelled from the tilted wagon. A shape retreated, 2 shapes shielding, torches thrown down to block the way. Brant yanked his reins. The horse skittered, pivoted half round, bolted from the yard. The broken wheel rattled in the ruts. Sparks from its nails scattered like small rain. Fire in the roof had bitten deep. Mira levered a board loose with a shovel, slammed it down on the burning straw. Sparks spattered, peppering her shirt. Cole leaned on the porch post, breathing out through his mouth, hand on his shoulder wound. Lark pulled the hose from the tank. The flow was thin as thread. She poured it on the fire's foot. Ash blew back into her face, hot and salty. The yard emptied, leaving only the roof's groan and the wood staggered collapse. The tin cup lay upturned at Cole's feet, its round bottom catching specks of falling ash. He stooped, righted it, set it back on its old water ring, a habit without reason. In his hat brim, the thin paper was half dry, still, silent. Cole looked to Mira, Mira to Lark. No one said, "Done." It wasn't. The tar sent from the thickness of a page hidden in a hat brim. Smoke pooled under the half-fallen barn roof, curling gray. Brant pulled his horse from the rut, the lopsided wheel clattering until the sound faded beyond the fence. Two bodies lay across the shadows of dead torches. One hand still clenched a snapped rein. Mira yanked the hose from the tank, water coming in bursts like a winded breath. She threw it onto the last lick of flame, the heat slapping back against her hands. Lark shifted a bucket, slipped on wet ash, still locking the ledger to her side. Cole leaned on the post, left hand pressed to the graze on his shoulder, right pulling the drum lid to scoop ash onto the smoldering straw. Ash blew back in his mouth, briny. The roof groaned as a beam gave, collapsing a section. Wire staples flew with a tinny clink. They fought the fire until their hands blistered white. Glove seams pressed into skin. When the flames sank to red veins in the ash, the old dog still lay at the porch step, head turned toward the barn as if listening. Cole knelt. Its tongue was cold. He stroked from brow to muzzle along the same path as always, his hand trembling once before holding still. Mira bent to close the animal's eyes. Her finger stalled at the corner, catching on soot. No one spoke. Lark turned to the stone stove where the bone from before had split in the burn. One piece rolled to the hearth's edge. She hooked it back with a fingernail, set it on the hot drum lid. Ash smell bit her throat. She scooped fresh cinders, poured them over the bone until it was buried. Her hand was black with soot, burn lines thin as threads. She set her boot heel on it, pressed down slow and steady. The bone cracked dry, like an old corn kernel popping late. She looked up, met Mira's eyes for a beat. No plea, no explanation. The younger sister who had marked the way had burned the path herself. Mira didn't embrace, didn't praise. She only brushed the ash from Lark's boots so it wouldn't cling, her hand cupped slightly, as if sheltering the last ember from the wind. In the dark corner, the black-bound ledger lay open to the page with a boot print. Lark pulled a half-burnt rope from the straw pile, blew off the ash, wound it twice around the ledger's spine, tied a knot. The knot wasn't neat, but it was tight. On another page, the name C. Maddox still showed clearly, the paper's surface slightly swollen from water. Lark ran a fingertip along that line, stopping at the ink-scored M. Her finger left slowly, as if from a burn. Cole took off his hat and set it on the table. The thin sheet of paper caught inside the leather band was drying. The sat straight, eyes fixed on the table's edge, where the county seal on the previous page still printed faintly. Breathing shifted when Lark gathered the loose pages scattered around. One scrap was smaller than a fingernail, streaked with oil. She tucked it inside, not in the middle, but right against the cover, where it would be hardest to see. What caught in their throats wasn't the sound of crying. It was the faint rasp of paper on paper as it was bound. To declare the truth meant carrying the name C. Maddox alongside Brant's transfer. No one used the words tomorrow. They left a ledger there, its half-burnt rope, a mark anyone could read. Mira opened the wooden chest, took out a new hinge, oil-bright nails, a wrench with a loose grip, replaced the door's slack joint. The hammer's strikes on metal rang through the frame and into the teeth. She braced the beam with a short timber. Its edge met the post flush, the crack narrowing. Lark pulled a tarp over the roof's hole, tied it with wet hemp cord to resist flame. Cole wiped the Winchester with a damp rag, fingers tracing the dark wood to a familiar dent. He wrapped the rifle in old cloth, put it in the iron chest, dropped the lid without locking it. Beside it, the dented tin cup, still smoke-stained, had been rinsed, but sat upside down on the step. The smell of smoke clung to wood, to cloth, to hair. 2 scrubbings wouldn't lift it, like a sentence once spoken. While cleaning, Lark picked a spent casing from the porch board's gap, put it in the chest, alongside a broken bone stub. Mira hung the new latch, making the door's bite into the frame sound soft, unlike the morning's. Cole pulled a straight black nail from his kit and drove it into the porch post, exactly where the old bone had hung. No groove, no mark. A vertical line, looking upward, like a spine. They dug a small hole under the mulberry, the soil damper than the yard's. The shovel's blade touched a young root with a soft knock. Cole lifted the dog in both arms, held it close so its head rested in his elbow's crook, the way he carried it in winter. Its worn collar came off, set in the hole beside its shoulder. The crescent tag rang light against the shovel's edge. Lark stood opposite, her hands still marked with burns, unwashed. Mira brushed hair from her forehead with the soot-black back of her hand. They lowered the dog, covered it in thin layers of earth, never packing hard. Cole fetched the tin cup from the porch, dent facing the sky, and placed it, slipping. Mira leaned a hammer against the tree to remind herself to bring stones later. Lark looked at Brant's hoof marks, shallow at the yard's edge, then at the new black nail on the porch post. 2 opposite signs, one going, one staying. When they turned from the porch, the black ledger still lay on the table, its burnt rope knotted. On its edge, the sweat print of Lark's palm faded in a salt outline. The name C. Maddox hadn't dulled. Inside the hat, the transfer to Brant page had dried. No one lifted it to read. Only the new latch closed, whisper-soft, like an eyelid settling as the last ash fell. In the stone stove, the iron brand with CM lay sideways, like a dead fish in cold stone. Ash edged the C in white-gray. A thin soot film dimmed the M, like soil over a name. No coal, no flame. The stove mouth gaped just enough for wind to pass, leaving a hollow hiss, like a dry swallow. Cole stood to one side, prodding the coals with an iron rod. The tip touched the brand's spine with a muted tang, half swallowed by ash, then stopped. His hand didn't touch the handle, didn't lift it. He drew the rod out, leaned it on the stove edge, leaving a black streak. His glove was dry with soot, the thumb joint darkened, in a round smudge like a pressed mark. Mira stood in the doorway, shoulder to the frame, eyes passing over CM to Cole's hand on the rod. She didn't ask if he meant to heat it again. Cole didn't reach in. He only dropped the lid another half span. The mouth was so narrow that any ember left couldn't show. No glow, only damp stone smell and cold ash. On the table, the ledger was bound. The burnt rope's knot was smudged like a cigarette bite. Lark tugged the cord lightly, not over-tightening. The end settled back into place. She set the ledger dead center, its spine flush with a crack in the wood, as if aligned to a chalk line. On the porch post, the straight black nail stood where the bone had hung. A new sign replacing an old one. No grooves, no signals. Its back carried the sweat sheen of a recent press. Mira looked at the nail, then the porch. A thin soot line clung to the post's crown. She wiped with the back of her hand, smearing it darker. She left it. They moved between stove, table, porch, like water circling a rock. Cole passed the table, hat still low. Proof of a loss set down without taking back. The table with the ledger, the post with the nail, the porch with the leveled chair. Myra pulled 3 rocking chairs into a row, one left empty in the center. She tested each. Legs touched wood with short scrapes. The vibration different with each wear pattern. The middle didn't creak. It was new. Lark eyed it, fingers rubbing together as if to scrub away the smoke smell caught in skin. The new latch bit into the frame tight. Each close made a thin tick like lashes meeting. Lark tried it once, let go. The tick was soft. She waited another beat to be sure she'd heard it right. Myra set the hammer by the wall, head outward, turning the handle so it wouldn't catch in passing. Cole lifted the tin cup, rinsed it with the last water. The dent caught a drop, swallowed it. He set it back upside down in its old ring. No one touched it again. It stood like intent. On the step, ash sprinkled like salt. Among them, one black, oil-slick grain rolled against the wind, stopping under the porch post's black nail. Myra opened the chest, took a clean cloth, rubbed soot from a rifle stock until the grain showed. She set it inside without locking. The lid came down slow. The hinges took the sound like a throat swallowing words. Lark dropped the leftover burnt rope into the chest's corner. Its end shed a fleck she pressed flat into the wood with a nail. On the table, the ledger lay flat. The knot wasn't neat. Beside it, 3 spent shells from the porch sat in a row, each catching the glint of last night's fire. Lark rolled one with a fingertip, let it go. It made a short turn and stood, mouth aimed at the empty chair. She left it. Cole went to the porch post, set his forefinger on the black nail, pressed no deeper. His eyes moved from nail to empty chair to ledger to hat. His breath eased when it reached the hat. Inside, the thin page dried against his skin. Brant's transfer, like a cold stone hidden in a summer hat. Myra followed his gaze. When it stopped at the empty chair, she turned away, lowering the latch softly. Wind slid by. The tarp patch on the barn roof twitched once. Under it, the new beam stayed quiet. A nail head flashed once, snuffed when the cloud passed. No one spoke of town. On the trail, dust had settled long. Dry grass stood still, its tips bent from wet ash. The wagon with the broken wheel was gone, but its tracks stayed shallow outside the gate in the soft earth. On harder ground, jagged edges still held grit. Dust clung to the tin cups inside, just enough that a tap on its bottom would sound dull, not clear. Cole didn't tap. He left the cup upside down on the step, mouth down, bottom to the sky, like at the dog's grave. 2 alike, one waiting, one kept. Mira stood in the porch, an old cloth folded in quarters in her hand, not wiping, just holding. Her eyes fixed on the trail, slid to the hat, and stopped at the band where the paper was wedged. Lark stood close to the table, one hand on the ledger, the other touching the rope's knot. No one forbade, no one urged. The silence between them was tight enough that if one spoke the first word, the next would dissolve on its own. Cole adjusted his hat. The paper slid 1/2 millimeter wedged deeper into the seam. He slipped a finger under the band's edge, not to pull it free, just to keep it from falling if the wind rose. He turned to the rocking chair, set a hand on the back of the empty one, and didn't sit. The wood was cool. The fresh scratch along the back was still new. He drew his hand away, stood for a beat, then walked toward the open gate. On the table, the black-bound ledger lay flat. The burnt rope pointed toward the porch like an arrow. Mira stepped up, turned the ledger half around, the spine now toward the gate. Lark watched, didn't change her grip, only eased her shoulders, as if handing old weight back to the bone there. The wind carried ash and the resin smell still caught in the gate's wood. The CM brand in the stove stayed dark. Cole passed the porch post, the black nail at eye height, no marking. He looked up for a beat, then lowered his gaze. The brim brushed his forehead. The gate ahead, unlatched. The road empty. The cup upside down. He might go out. He might come back. No one asked. No one promised. The door latch inside fit tight, would make a soft click if anyone pushed, enough to remember. Cole set his hand on the gatepost without gripping. He tipped his hat a degree, holding the paper in place. On the porch, the 3 chairs stayed still, the middle one still empty. On the table, the ledger faced the road. The cup waited. Then nothing. Only wind moving through those things, each in its set place. The brand in the stove, the nail in the post, the latch in the frame, the tied ledger, the upside-down cup. The truth sat in the hat, unread, but heavy enough that the next step, strategy or betrayal. An unlatched gate, an empty chair, an unread page, enough to ask, who do you owe your silence to? And who do you owe the truth? What would you set on the step tomorrow morning? The cup upside down or the ledger? Or would you wear the hat, the paper still there, and step through the gate? I want your reason, not to judge, only to know which road you call right.